To do a discharge reconciliation, first select the correct patient, come up here to the toolbar where there's an orders reconciliation button, and we suggest that you maximize the window so you can see as much as possible. And here we're going to do a discharge new reconciliation. When this opens up, you'll notice that the meds are listed on the left-hand side. These will either be home or inpatient meds that the patient has been on in the past or during this admission, and each one will be labeled as either inpatient or home med. What you're going to want to do is, working on this list of medications, you're going to want to continue those meds that you want the patient to take at home. And what we're going to do is, on the Capitan, I'm going to continue the home Capitan. So I'm going to use this green continue button. That's going to continue the previous home med at the same dose and schedule. The insulin's moving down. The aspart insulin was actually a therapeutic substitution. As you could see at home, the patient was on insulin glucosine. So we're going to continue the insulin glucosine. Again, I'm using the green continue arrow, and that's going to give them the same dose and schedule. The patient was on simvastatin in the hospital and Zocor at home, both at 40 milligrams once a day. But let's say for this example, we want to create a different prescription for the patient. We want them to go home on 80 milligrams of Zocor. So I'm going to click this actions button here that shows up at the end of the entry, and I'm going to say replace with new prescription. And I'm going to pick from this list of common doses and SIGs. I'm going to double click on the 80 milligrams. That's going to open up the entry in Prescription Writer, where all you generally will have to do is fill out the days and quantity, any refills, or any other instructions. And then you'll say done. So that took care of the Zocor. Moving down, the patient was on 81 milligrams of aspirin at home and 325 as an inpatient. We want to continue the higher dose. So I'm going to leave the home med alone, and I'm going to continue the inpatient. The Plavix, they were on as a new med as an inpatient only, and if we want them to go home on that, we're going to have to create a prescription. And unlike the Zocor above, we're going to give them the prescription for the same amount. So all I need to do is click this prescription button here, and that's going to carry over all the attributes of the order. So we have 75 milligrams, one tablet, orally once a day. And I'm going to select done. I need to put a quantity in, so we'll give them 30-day supply and 3 refills. I'm going to say done there. This is an example of a drug interaction alert because the patient's on both aspirin and Plavix. To acknowledge this, you just have to hit the acknowledgement button, and there are some comments that are pre-formatted up here where you can say that the MD is aware and it's okay to go home on that. And then you hit proceed. And the Bentyl they were on at home previously, we can continue that. And we're left with now everything that has a green check mark has been reconciled. Everything with a red asterisk needs addressed yet. But if all the meds you want the patient to go home with are on this right-hand side, you can discontinue everything else using this button here that will mark all remaining as reviewed and not required at discharge. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And you can see everything now has a green check mark. So that's kind of part one of the discharge process. You'll notice there's some buttons down here, save as complete, save as incomplete. We're actually not done yet because we want to go in and do a discharge order set for things like activity and nursing. So when I click this icon up here, enter discharge order, I'm going to get a patient confirmation screen. So as long as we have the right patient, we'll say OK. This is going to bring us into an order entry window where I'm going to double click on this order set here called discharge instructions. Once this order set opens up, you'll see several grids with different categories. The very top order is the actual discharge patient order. Now, if the patient's not going home today, we suggest you don't put this order in just yet. This could be the last thing that gets put in when the patient is ready to go. If you're prepping them in advance, though, you can fill out just about everything else. So I'm going to say the patient is going home. I'm going to discharge them at home. It automatically will pull today's date. The discharge diagnosis is going to pull in if there are problems on the problem list, but these can be edited. These up here are retrievals. This down here is the actual order. So by opening this up, I can then add something. And I'm just typing with the keyboard. I'll say OK. And the next thing you'll notice, the next grid down are some specialty order sets. And we're going to say this patient was on a cardiology floor. So I'm going to put a check mark in cardiology. This is going to open up an order set specific to cardiology where I can say activity is tolerated, may walk up and down steps, no lifting more than, and let's say we want to say 10 pounds. You can see 5 pounds is defaulted in here. But if I want to say 10 pounds, I just click out to the right of that field and I can change it to 10 pounds. No driving for 24 hours. No bathing for 2 days. Sexual activity as tolerated. And then here's some wound instructions. We can give them all these by just checking. And we want them to be on a cardiac diet, which is defaulted in here, so I could check that. And I want to give them a prescription for lab studies, so I could check lab studies. And then down here, there's some common labs that I could check. And in here, I'm going to say when I want them to have those labs done. So we could say in 1 week. We can tell them to fast for 24 hours. The diagnosis field is required. And again, these are going to pull in the problems where I can just check whichever one. And let's say I'm done with this. This will take me back out to the main order set where I can do my follow-up appointments in this grid. And I'm going to say follow-up appointment with. And this will bring up the attendings, consultants, and family doctors. If you just double click, that'll enter them in there. You could say when you want them to be seen. This is going to put in post-hospitalization and call office next working day. If you're managing the patient's Coumadin, you can check there. You can say why they're on Coumadin. And I'm going to scroll down. There's a few more fields here to hit. You can do prescriptions for outpatient services such as home health. Again, you would put in the diagnosis. If none of these are appropriate, you can type this in just by clicking your cursor there and using the keyboard. You can do prescriptions for DME. Again, putting in the required diagnosis. And I'm going to say OK here. These are all the discharge orders we've done, and now we can hit this button to return to orders reconciliation. So now everything on the right side of orders reconciliation is what will comprise the patient's discharge instructions, and if all this is good, you can save it as complete. At that point, the prescription writer will launch where you can submit your prescriptions, either e-submitting or printing. So we'll submit those, and we're done. The nurse now gets notified with a flag such as this, and they can see the actual orders that were written.